Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am your host. My name is Brent Skinner, and I do many things at HR.com. And today, however, is about my guest, as always, and my guest today is Miranda Zolot. Welcome, Miranda.
Hi, glad to be here, Brent.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad to have you here. It's such a pleasure and a great honor to have you here on the podcast. We have a really interesting topic. You are general counsel at Oyster HR, which is an employer of record, a well-known one, and we're going to be talking about EU Pay Transparency Directive. The deadline set for June 7th of this year. We have a working title for this podcast. The EU Pay Transparency Clock is ticking. Are you actually ready? And I'm sure we'll get into a lot of that today. But first, as I like to ask all my guests, what got you into this line of work? What's your passion when it comes to the world of work? I find that lots of people, there's a lot of passion in this market space with professionals in it. What gets you going every day, Miranda?
I agree. I love what I do. I'm a lawyer, and lawyering can be kind of boring depending on what facet of lawyering you choose, at least I think. And for me, as an employment lawyer, and I was trained as an employment lawyer and kind of came up through the ranks representing companies, I love the fact that I get to visit all of my customers and clients in their workplace and really understand what they do and help them meet whatever goals they are trying to achieve. It's a little bit like, you know, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I'm aging myself a little bit here, but where he would go and visit, like, how do you make a guitar? How do you actually sort the mail? And in each of these companies, the way that they're trying to do something and the goals they're trying to meet are heavily influenced by their workforce. And anything that we can do to help them move that forward, help them support that worker, that's really exciting and fun. And it's a different every day. And so that's what, for me, keeps it fresh, particularly with EORs. You're working with companies around the globe, trying to do some really exciting things. And anything that we can do to help that, it's just fun. That's what
Yeah.
keeps me coming back.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you know what? You're right. It's such a complex regulatory landscape when you look at it globally, and we could talk about that for another episode of the podcast, maybe. Compliance being such a, part and parcel of the EOR business model. Let's get into the topic today. The EU pay. Why am I having a mind cramp already in the podcast? EU Pay Transparency Clock. It's ticking. The Transparency Directive. Before we I have a few questions for you, but maybe first off, what is this? What is it all about? What's going on here?
Yeah, so the EU Pay Transparency, I'm going to do the same thing. The EU Pay Transparency Directive is the attempt for the EU to provide equal pay for equal work. And that's the base level, that's what it is, equal pay for equal work. But determining that is really challenging. It sets out a couple of framework items that each of its member states are meant to enact. Um, there's a pre-hire set of, let's say, mandates, and that is things like ensuring that you state how much the salary is going to be for the role or the salary range, using inclusive neutral language to describe the job itself and the duties that are required for that particular role. You can't ask employees or prospective employees about their salary histories. And these are things that are meant to give, prospects an idea of what the role is, and for hirers not to create a presumption about what someone might be paid for a particular role. Great. I mean, I think a lot of folks are doing that already. This
Right.
just creates a requirement to do it. And maybe you're not doing it everywhere. I know that, a lot of times you try to do what's required in a particular jurisdiction. And if it's something that you can easily apply everywhere, great. But if it's not, maybe as an HR person, you're only going to do it in one place. So this really is the opportunity or challenge, I guess, depending on how you look at it, to unify the way that at least you're dealing with recruiting and bringing people into your business. That's the first part of the Pay Act. The next part is for current employees. So you have current employees. The Pay Act essentially says you need to give them information. You need to let them understand what you're paying them as related to other people doing similar work. It makes it where they can ask for pay levels for comparable role, and it requires you to just sort of show your salary bands and what you're paying. So that allows current employees to understand where they're being paid in the scheme of things for the work that they're doing. And then there's a reporting element. It requires you to look across your jobs to do an audit and sort of say like, okay, are we paying equal amounts or relatively equal amounts for work of equal value? Now, this isn't about job titles or things like that. It's literally like, what is the work? What is the pay? And where there is a gap, there are reporting requirements. There are different things that you're going to need to do based on your jurisdiction. But essentially, it is requiring us all to look at how we pay and what we pay for, and then how we might, if there is a gap, make that gap smaller with the hope that we're all getting to a place where you are paid equally for your work, regardless of your gender, whether you're disabled or not, and other things like that. And there's enforcement provisions, of course. Um, but hopefully we won't have to deal with that. We're all going to we're all going to get to the right place. We won't have to worry
Yes.
about enforcement. But there
You know,
definitely are strengthened enforcements, penalties, those sorts of things as part of the directive.
yeah. It's always the enforcement piece of compliance that obviously is kind of is the driving factor.
Mhm.
Often, uh, and it's a great directive. It really is. It sounds like a lot of stuff. There's a lot of moving parts there to be ready to comply with on the date. I think it's July 7th, right?
Yes, July
Excuse me,
7th.
Is it July or June?
Sorry, no. It's actually June 7th.
Yeah, June 7th. So June 7th, everybody, June 7th. Um, is how, what does it take to get compliant in time? Like what does a company need to do? Like what
So
would your recommendation be?
let's talk a little bit about the time, because June 7th is the date that the member states need to have their rules in place. So June 7th is when every country needs to say, like, okay, we've looked at this directive. They've had it for almost 3 years, mind you.
Mm,
So they are looking at it saying, okay, this is how we're going to implement it in our country. And note to all of you out there, it can be different in every single country. Um, and it will be different in every single country. So June 7th is the country's deadline for getting their rules together, and then actual reporting and compliance with those rules comes a year later. So does that mean you have a whole nother year to prepare? Not really, because it's going to be backwards looking. So
mhm,
everyone should aim towards June 7th as a time to start looking at their pay equity within their business. And what do
mhm,
you need to do to get ready for that? There's a couple of things. One, you need to understand your data. I know
mhm,
this sounds pretty basic, but if you are employing in multiple jurisdictions, you may be using different payroll providers. You may be using an EOR in some places. You may have an entity in some places. You may be using a contractor in some places. But gathering all of that information together and then being able to compare the apples and oranges to oranges. That
mhm,
second part, the comparison, where you're actually doing the analysis, is really tricky because it requires you to, at a base level, have a format that allows you to compare one job to another. So
mhm,
maybe you're really advanced and you have job descriptions that set out the type of work that needs to be done, the amount of time, the level of expertise required, the level of expertise you use when searching for it, uh, all of those sorts of very detailed information that you would have about a job. um, and then in a format that you can compare them one job to another. Um, we all know that like keeping job descriptions up to date is challenging as our teams evolve and things like that. This requires updated job descriptions for everyone in your organization, and then to be able to compare them against each other to understand, for instance, like what does a senior manager mean at our organization, and is it the same across all of our particular business units or not? Do we need to create separate categories for business units because the work is not equal? So that part, that analysis of the jobs, is really difficult, and it presupposes that you have these job descriptions in good working order that you can grab and look at. Um, but that is where I would encourage people to spend their time right now, pulling together a true census and audit of what are the jobs that are being done, and then comparing them. Looking at the salary is sort of the next level of analysis, and whether there are gaps or not. But really, the hard part, I think, is understanding what jobs are being done, how they're leveled, and if that's accurate right now.
Mm, mm. I bet their technology probably plays into that, right? Because in terms of comparing some of that data and information, if you have difficult time sort of sharing information between systems, you might be in a little bit of trouble.
Yes, absolutely. If you have the data and it is in one place, great. Most people don't have all the data. Most people don't have it all in one place. And to your
Mhm,
point, if you are using different vendors, if you have your entities segregated, you may have a
mhm,
subsidiary in one country that is different from your subsidiary. There may be completely handled differently. You may have done a merger recently. There's a lot of things that make this potentially challenging to gather all the data together. Technology can be really helpful, but if it's not connected, it can make this a very manual effort.
yeah, yeah. Um, uh, one question I have is, I mean, we're talking about all the different member states, right? And they're all going to have a
Mhm.
little bit of a different flair when it comes to this, right? Um,
Yes,
what kind of variation are you anticipating there? Because that's an unknown factor right now that maybe is s- maybe keeping companies from even being able to start preparing right now because they don't know what it's going to be like in the various states they're in.
absolutely. I mean, one of the base requirements of this act is to evaluate pay components. A pay component can be anything from a salary to a bonus, an allowance, equity. Um, any variation of these. And each member state has the ability to define what their pay components are. So, from
Mm,
a very base level, what you're counting can vary from place to place. Other things that are different from country to country, or we expect to be different from country to country, are these things called wage influencing factors. These are factors like education or seniority, the number of direct reports that someone has, that might weigh towards a finding that a different pay is okay. These
mhm,
are, things that you would put on the scale that say, okay, well, it says they're both managers, but really they're not managing the
mhm,
same level of humans, the number of humans, you need more expertise. These are the things that we as employers look for that distinguish how we compensate individuals. So
mhm,
different countries will have different wage influencing factors that you can apply to the audit itself. So, I mean, just using those two very basic things, you could be looking at wildly different information based on the country that you're working in. And then, we talked a little bit about enforcement. Penalties are different country to country. The precedent law for what is discriminatory or not is different from country to country. So even once you get past the exercise of trying to make to get to reduce the gap, identify the gap if there is one, if you do everything right and someone believes that perhaps you haven't and they move to, enforce something or bring a claim, that's going to look different in every country that you're in. as if, in the US, every single state has its own way of managing certain laws and claims. So it's really going to be a patchwork. And I think that for those of you that are thinking it's just the EU directive, that's really going to be difficult if to create a harmonized approach to these things. I would encourage people to really like look at where your biggest risks are. Where do you have the most people? And focus your energy on those jurisdictions,
Mm.
and kind of, move through priority of where you have the most people, the most risk, the most opportunity, down to places where, if you have one or two people, then obviously there's going to be a lot less work to do there.
Yeah, so risk management, risk mitigation, all these kinds of things that are obviously top of mind for C-level executives everywhere and at every employer. You talked about, really thinking deeply and granularly about the roles at your organization. Our two roles, are they really comparable? Right? Would it appear as if they are, but if you really think about it, because you're closest to it, I'm using the royal you, you're closest to it as an employer, you know best whether these roles are indeed comparable. Um, so it sounds like lot of there's a lot of opportunity here to engage the assistance of folks who are versed in employment law to really help with this kind of stuff. Um, what is Oyster HR doing in terms of this particular directive? I'm sure that since you folks have a lot of, obviously you're an EOR. This is your game, really. What are you folks doing to help your clients?
Sure. So one of the beauties of an EOR is if you actually do have any team members that are supporting your work through an EOR, the EOR is actually the employer. So for all of our team members, we are the employer, and we have to go through the process of looking amongst all of our team members to understand what the work they're doing is. One of the things that makes it difficult for us, frankly. I mean, this is a difficult I mean, the whole balance of what a team member might do for one customer versus what a team member might do for another customer within the same country is a lot different for an EOR. Um, what we are doing, and this is where, in high gear with this, is we do have very clear job descriptions. We do have very clear salary bands. We pride ourselves as an organization on being transparent to our staff, and that's one of the things that is really part of our mission and who we are. It is scary for a company to be open about exactly what the salary bands are, exactly where you are in the salary bands, being very transparent about if you're at the bottom, if you're at the top. What if the bands shift and you're below the bands? How do you explain that to someone who maybe because of exchange rates now is making less than they might have been a year ago because of the way the macroeconomic things are at work? These are all really challenging, but if you are very deliberate and open, it builds some trust with both you and your employees about um, performance, where are you performing in the roles, how your pay is impacted by performance. All of those are really healthy dynamics or can be really healthy dynamics, but it starts with being very open about this is where we value this role in this country. And that's
Mm.
another point. Like you might have a role that is valued at one salary range in one country, and it's a little bit different in another country, based on perhaps the work that needs to be done in that country, the availability of talent in that country, all of these sorts of things. But it does
Yeah.
start with being really transparent, and it starts with being very crisp around your job descriptions, and around the playbooks that you're using for recruiting. And you can't really do that unless you have created a rubric around what does a entry level person look like? What are the skills that we required? What are the competencies? What does it look like when they level up? What does a lead look like? What does a manager look like? What do I expect for a director? And really working through those competencies, um, are helpful in cases like this, where you're going to pay equity audits, where you're looking to make sure that you are paying the same for the same work. It is a lot of work to build them. But again, it adds transparency because then when you're having conversations with your staff about, hey, these are the competencies. We talked about this. You have a little bit more to go on this one. And if you look at the next level up, this is what we would expect here. And so it also allows you to have performance conversations in a really constructive way that
Mm.
you can't have if you don't have very discrete uh, rubrics and competencies around your role levels. So we have a lot of that, and we have built ourselves to be able to do that. And that's one of the ways that we are able to help our customers is because we truly do understand how to do this at scale. And if we're placing someone with you, then it's our problem. It's not yours.
Yeah.
And that's one of the really interesting things about EOR. You're able to have the best of both worlds and that you have, a group of folks that are working in Sweden, but we have to take care of the pay transparency requirements for Sweden because we are the employer. Um,
Mm.
so, we do offer consultation services for our customers around these things, but if you're with us, then this isn't one of your problems. So that's a nice thing in and of itself.
It is. It is. It's a lot for employers to think about. It's definitely something to enlist the support of experts in it, and that's where EORs come in. Um, we could talk about this for a lot longer. We have a 20-minute long podcast here, and we're already up on time. Um, Miranda, thank you so much for joining this episode of the podcast. This has been really illuminating.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been really good. It's a really complicated topic, and I would encourage folks to definitely talk to partners, find a local lawyer or a local HR person with expertise in the areas that you're working or looking to expand in, um, and they'll help. Everyone's struggling right now. So I would say that's the one thing to take away from all of this. Like, if it's hard for you, it's hard for everybody.
There is some solace in that. Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Miranda.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at hr.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.